Supreme Court repeals Chevron Deference, implications for Americans. The recent ruling by the United States Supreme Court to overturn the Chevron Deference doctrine represents a significant shift in American legal and governance frameworks. This decision carries extensive implications, providing substantial benefits to ordinary Americans while bolstering individual sovereignty and freedom. To fully comprehend the gravity of this ruling, it is essential to delve into the history and context of Chevron deference and its impact on power dynamics. Understanding Chevron deference. Defining Chevron deference. Chevron deference originated from the 1984 Supreme Court case Chevron U.S.A. Inc. versus Natural Resources Defense Council, Incorporated. This doctrine mandated that courts defer to a federal agency's interpretation of an ambiguous statute, provided the interpretation was reasonable. Consequently, federal agencies were granted considerable latitude in interpreting laws, thereby augmenting their regulatory authority. The ascendancy of federal agencies. Federal agencies, often described as the fourth branch of government, have expanded their power and influence over the years. Agencies such as the FDA, EPA, and SEC wield considerable authority to formulate rules and regulations within their domains. Although these agencies are part of the executive branch, Chevron deference allowed them not only to enforce laws, but also to interpret and effectively create laws through their regulations. The separation of powers, the vision of the Founding Fathers. Legislative, executive, and judicial branches. The United States Constitution delineates a clear separation of powers among the legislative, executive, and judicial branches to prevent the concentration of power in any single entity. Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution states, "All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives." This means that only Congress has the authority to make laws. The executive branch, led by the President, is responsible for enforcing the laws, while the judicial branch interprets them. However, over time, the boundaries between these powers have become increasingly blurred, particularly with the rise of federal agencies. The issue of delegated authority. Congress has progressively delegated its legislative responsibilities to federal agencies, allowing them to create rules and regulations with the force of law. This delegation is often justified by the specialized expertise of these agencies in complex areas such as environmental protection, finance, and public health. However, it raises concerns about accountability and the concentration of power. The Chevron case and its consequences. The two-step Chevron test. The Chevron ruling established a two-step process for courts to determine whether to defer to an agency's interpretation of a statute. 1. Is the statute ambiguous? If the law is clear, the court must follow the clear intent of Congress. 2. Is the agency's interpretation reasonable? If the law is ambiguous, the court should defer to the agency's interpretation as long as it is reasonable. This reasonableness standard set a low threshold for agency interpretations, effectively granting them broad discretion. Concentration of power. Chevron deference permitted agencies to function as lawmakers, enforcers, and interpreters of the law. This concentration of power led to what many describe as a deep state, where unelected bureaucrats could exert significant influence over public policy and individual lives without direct accountability to the electorate. The Supreme Court's decision, restoring equilibrium. The Loper-Bright Enterprises case. The Supreme Court's recent decision to overturn Chevron deference stemmed from the case Loper-Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo. The case involved the National Marine Fisheries Service, which began charging fishing businesses $700 per day for monitoring services without explicit authorization from Congress. Loper-Bright Enterprises, a family fishing business, contested this fee, arguing it was an unconstitutional overreach. The ruling. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Loper-Bright Enterprises, effectively overturning Chevron deference. The court emphasized that agencies under the executive branch lack the constitutional authority to interpret laws, a role reserved for the judicial branch as intended by the Constitution. Implications for Americans. Enhanced accountability. The repeal of Chevron Deference restores the balance of power among the branches of government. Courts will no longer be mandated to defer to agency interpretations, ensuring that laws are interpreted by an independent judiciary. This enhances accountability and curtails the unchecked power of federal agencies. Protection of individual rights. By reinstating the judiciary's role in interpreting laws, the decision safeguards individual rights and freedoms. Agencies can no longer create and enforce rules without judicial oversight, reducing the risk of arbitrary and oppressive regulations. Implications for future legislation. While this ruling does not address the broader issue of Congress delegating its legislative responsibilities to agencies, it sets a precedent for increased judicial scrutiny of agency actions. This may prompt Congress to be more precise in its legislation, reducing the ambiguity that agencies have exploited under Chevron Deference. Conclusion. The Supreme Court's decision to overturn Chevron Deference marks a significant victory for individual liberty and the constitutional separation of powers. It curtails the expansive power of federal agencies, ensuring that laws are interpreted by the judiciary, as envisioned by the Founding Fathers. This ruling represents a step towards greater accountability, transparency, and protection of individual rights within the American legal system. As we move forward, it is essential for citizens to remain vigilant and hold their elected representatives accountable, ensuring that the principles of liberty and justice continue to guide our nation.
As always, do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel, All Things Money, to see more content like this.